Welcome to the PinkpillRx podcast, hosted by Katie and Jay Fillmore, where we navigate complex and thought-provoking topics surrounding women with a focus on education. For shorter form content, follow us on TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube at Caters88 or PinkpillRx.
That's KATORS88.
If you enjoy this podcast, please give us a follow and maybe a nice review.
Hey, Pink Pill fam, how are ya?
That was a new one.
That was a new one. We have a special episode this week because of where we're recording. We are camping. So there are about 1 million things that could go wrong with this recording, including golf carts driving by, cats meowing because we have one in our camper right now, and children interrupting us. So if there's any background noise, we apologize ahead of time. We're real life people with real lives, and this isn't as professional as it might seem.
It's really not.
Yes, but we are recording in our bed in the camper because that's where we record, in our bed. So if you ever have thought about doing a podcast before, I just want you to know you can just lay in bed and record it, and it's okay. There's no rules. With
I love that about podcasting. You can kind of just do it wherever.
Yeah, and you know, again, I got a shout out to the Selfish Woman podcast, who was the first podcast we were ever guests on, because she, in one of her episodes, had mentioned that she records in her bed sometimes, and I was like, you can do that? That's legal? You don't need to have like this whole professional setup, I guess, you know?
We've been here ever since.
And we've been here ever since, so shout out to that. Today we're going to be talking about, of course, another hot topic, as per usual. But this particular podcast was inspired by Celeste Davis's article that she put out on Substack. I'm not certain if she published it other places, but it was on Substack. And a friend actually shared it with me from work, so shout out to her. Also, shout out to my friend who's watching my kids right now while pregnant and camping next to us. She said she would do it as long as we gave her a shout out. So just want to shout out to Julie. She's the real MVP here.
Thank you, Julie, so much.
Thank you. So back to Celeste Davis's article. It's called "The Real Reason Dating is So Hard Right Now That No One Is Naming." So I want to extrapolate some themes out of it and just have a discussion about this because I think it's really interesting. We do have single friends that do struggle with dating. Mm-hmm. Women are reporting unprecedented dissatisfaction with modern dating. Men are reporting record levels of loneliness and relationship difficulties. Marriage rates have fallen dramatically over the past several decades. Meanwhile, we have dating apps that have created more access than any generation in history. Yet, many people describe dating as worse than ever. So if everyone has more options, why is nobody happier?
That's a great question. You have information to share about it?
I do.
Idea.
She shares some theories in her article. Celeste Davis argues that the answer is not dating apps, feminism, social media, or unrealistic standards alone. The deeper shift is this. For most of our history, relationships were built on necessity. Today, they are increasingly built on choice. So the central argument is not that women have become too picky or men have become worse. It is that society underwent a massive structural shift, and relationships are moving from necessity-based arrangements to choice-based partnerships. So when people no longer need each other to survive, they begin asking a different question. Does being with you make my life better than being alone? And modern dating is difficult because millions of people are still operating with expectations designed for the old system while living inside the new one.
So what would some expectations be inside of the old system?
I think the expectation is that that marriage is this necessity, I guess, or like this thing that people naturally desire. And I don't think that that's necessarily true if it makes your life harder. And I think because women don't need men to survive anymore, that it puts them both in precarious situations because it really becomes a choice-based system versus a survival-based system.
So has it shifted to a choice-based system just for women? But men, it's always been a choice-based system?
I believe, yes. And I think now they're both choice-based systems, which I guess, rewind a little bit because I do think that like men way back when, obviously, property was handed down through the male line. So it was important to have male heirs, so there was a necessity there.
Until you have a son, and then
but I'm
no longer.
So it was like survival of the name versus survival of the person, which is what more women were. Like they needed to be able to survive outside their father's household.
Wasn't there also more of a societal expectation on men that when you become an adult, you marry? Versus now it's more acceptable just to remain a bachelor? Is that a thing?
Yeah, I do think it's more acceptable to remain a bachelor. And I think it's becoming more and more acceptable to remain a single woman.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
But I do think that there's this big thing that she touches on that is like really revelationary. That's a big revelation.
TM.
Yeah, revelationary. That's not a word. Is that, survival, this was a survival institution. Now it's a highly selective choice situation. 47% of Americans say dating is harder now than 10 years ago. And 75% of daters say it was difficult to find people to date in the past year.
With more access to people.
With more access to people.
That's interesting.
It is interesting. Because for much of modern history, women often could not open bank accounts independently. They needed a man. Obtain mortgages, they needed a man. Build wealth, they needed a man. Access to higher education equally was not available. And they weren't allowed to pursue many careers.
Mm-hmm.
So none of this opportunity was available to them. So marriage functioned partly as an economic institution. And women needed men for financial security, housing, social status, legal protections, which created an enormous pressure to pair up regardless of relationship quality. So the quality of relationship was not as important, as like that connection, right? Wasn't as important because it was more survival based.
And back to what you said originally. So the question is, does this marriage make my life, or relationship make my life better than being alone?
Right.
Well, obviously, if you couldn't get a bank account on your own, have financial stability on your own, and things like that, then of course, being in that relationship, even if it wasn't the best quality relationship, was better than being alone.
Right. Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
And today, women have higher college graduation rates than men. They have greater workforce participation. They have independent earning power. And they have access to credit and property ownership rights. So in a way, the utility of men for survival mechanisms is a null and void point.
Right.
Because you can survive. So 47% of women ages 25 to 34 have a bachelor's degree versus 37% of men. And 58% of homes owned, like single family homes, owned by unmarried Americans are owned by single women. Now, what's interesting is investment properties, that's different. Men own more. But single family homes, women own more. So that's just interesting. Fun fact for you. Women's labor force participation has more than doubled since the 1950s. Not surprising. And I will mention, just as a caveat, the home ownership gaps vary by age group and income. So single women own the majority of homes that are owned by unmarried Americans. Not necessarily women are universally more financially secure than men. That's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
Because it does vary, But for the first time in history, many women can leave bad relationships and remain financially stable. And that changes the landscape. Yeah. Dating is no longer, can I survive without a partner? Like we said earlier, it's, does this relationship improve my life? And I think that puts a lot of... kind of calls men to this higher standard of emotional intelligence.
I was just thinking that.
You got to have these skills. And when you think about the patriarchy, we're not teaching men these skills. We're not teaching men how to be in relationship in the way that they need to be equipped to be in relationship.
Yeah, because we're never taught how to feel our feelings and communicate them and to be able to listen to somebody else's. Like, that's not a skill that's developed among boys.
Right.
So then it's not present when you're men in a relationship, so it's going to be dissatisfying to their female partners.
Yeah, and you're going to have a harder time finding quality partner.
Yeah. Yeah, so really the issue is the skill set. Because to say that it's the quality of men, yeah, I mean, that might be an accurate description. It could be, sure. But communicating it that way is more alienating language. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you differentiate between there's a skill set that men have not developed.
Yeah, that is really what I mean, and I apologize because that was poor wording on my part and more of impulsive wording on my part and not necessarily something I was meaning. I do mean that the skill set is not there because I think men societally are being indoctrinated still on the old system.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes, and that is leading to epidemic levels of loneliness.
Yeah, because we don't have the relationship skills.
Right. Several large studies repeatedly find that married men often experience better health outcomes, longer lifespans, and lower suicide rates and greater financial stability when they're married. So it's kind of flip-flopped.
Oh.
When it comes to like survival, literally.
We need you to survive.
You, for the first time probably in history, men need women to have longer lifespans.
But you don't need us to have longer lifespans.
And better financial stability. And women, don't need men in that same way.
That's interesting.
A 7.9 million person meta-analysis found unmarried status was more strongly associated with all-cause and cardiovascular mortality in men, which helps justify the claim that men often gain more from marriage on average, at least in health terms. But research consistently shows that bad relationships harm women significantly in their health, especially when you calculate in unpaid labor and the frequent carrying of the emotional management burden of families. That is really bad for women's mental health.
So it sounds like the current widespread dynamic of marriages is that men benefit health-wise and women are harmed health-wise.
Yeah.
By and large. Not overall, but just by and large.
Yes. There's an argument for that, I feel like.
Interesting. So then no wonder women would not want to be getting married as much.
Yeah, because
quality of life drops.
Bad or unequal relationships can be costly for women.
Yeah.
Even if single life is difficult, partnered life can be costly, you know?
It's a different type of difficult. One could argue more difficult, but it's a different type of difficult that then has more concrete negative effects.
Mm-hmm. And there is actually a happiness gap. Single women frequently report higher life satisfaction. Single women often have stronger friendships and report better well-being comparable and even comparable to their married peers.
Oh.
And then women are increasingly choosing singleness over unsatisfying partnerships, of course.
That makes sense.
So it creates a new dating marketplace.
So it sounds like there is a low supply with an equal amount of... There's a demand for men who are able to be in a healthy relationship, but there's not enough supply.
Yeah. Yeah, the currency of need has switched sides.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But many cultural expectations remain rooted in this older relationship structure. So there's this expectation that women should tolerate poor treatment because relationships are necessary, when the reality is women can leave.
And very possibly be happier.
Yeah. And domestic labor naturally falls to women is the expectation culturally. Like that is just a natural thing that happens.
So if you split from your husband, you're still going to... Either way, you have domestic labor, but if you split from your husband, you have less of it because it's just you.
Yeah.
Unless there's children involved, and that's a bit different. But still, if you're doing all the domestic labor and you have kids and a husband, and you switch, and it's just... And let's say you work too. You split, you're still working, you still have domestic labor, but one less person's laundry to do, one less person's dishes to do, one less person's everything.
Right. And it used to be that a man being employed is enough to be considered a good partner, as long as you can financially support the family.
Right.
Right? And now women are expecting emotional intelligence, shared labor, communication skills, active parenting, mutual respect. Again, the skills that aren't really valued or taught by the patriarchy and in the culture that we are raised in.
Right. Yeah, because it's a shameful thing to interact with your own emotions as a man and to share them or emote them. You know, you said something interesting though with a good partner. For a man to be defined as a good partner used to just be, can he provide for his family?
Mm-hmm.
Right? But didn't that go out the window decades ago with our economy now basically requiring 2 incomes to be able to support your family?
Oh, yeah.
So then you're not really providing, you're just providing your part.
Yeah, and I think women are like finally, we are not caught up whatsoever, but we are finally reaching that maybe threshold to where we're seeing the cultural shift in this dating dynamic and this relationship dynamic. Because women has had access to education for a while. They've had access to the workplace and stuff like that. But it takes time for an oppressed group of people, whether that's for racial disparities or gender disparities or whatever, to get to the point where it's actually making a cultural impact. And I think women now are getting to that point where it's actually making cultural impact when it comes to education. You know, the majority of bachelor's degrees are held by women. When it comes to home ownership, single family home ownership, you know, the same thing.
Yeah.
So I think now like the tides are turning. And again, on the flip side of this, I hate that it's called the male loneliness crisis or epidemic. I because I do feel like it's like self-created. But and that like they wouldn't speak so kindly to women if they were in this situation. And wouldn't be this loneliness crisis. It would be like this unsubordinate crisis, right? Or something like that. Like that there's something women are doing wrong versus men. It's like they're lonely. Like something's happened to them.
So really women are treated like millennials have always been treated by boomers in the news headlines and stuff. Millennials are killing the housing market.
Yeah.
Millennials are killing this or killing that. But that's how women would be portrayed in the headlines.
That's what I think. Yes.
Yeah. I totally agree with that with the caveat that not being self-inflicted because it's inflicted by the patriarchy towards men versus men doing the loneliness to themselves.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I don't think that I think this is a systemic thing. Absolutely. This is not like on necessarily an individual basis, but I do think that men have individual responsibility to recognize, and step out of.
Yeah, I think the hard part is it's not so much recognizing, because I think it's hard to recognize things on your own. A fish doesn't recognize they're in water on their own. But when confronted with information, as men, do we become resistant to ideas that are potentially true? Or are we open and just allow ourselves to think about them, entertain it? You know, I forget if it was Aristotle or Socrates that said it's the mark of an educated mind to entertain a thought without accepting it as true. Can we just entertain it and play around with it and say, hey, could this possibly be true? That we are harmed by the patriarchal structure of emotional suppression, and that's leading to loneliness. It's not women's fault.
Right.
Because I feel like it gets spun as it's women's fault that I am lonely, because like I think I've seen it before in Facebook comments, even anecdotally, that like, it's women's fault, or sometimes even just liberals' fault, but it's women's fault that feminism's fault that we're lonely, we're not valued in the culture,
but it's patriarchy's fault.
But really it's the patriarchal system. It's because you wouldn't be lonely if your relationships were able to have a bit more depth to them or a bit more longevity to them, which is difficult when you and your male friend were not reared with the emotional and relational skill set that you should have been.
Right.
And so it's hard to maintain or go deep in relationships. Not saying that they don't have any depth to them, not saying that at all, but there is a difference of what is versus what could be.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're not teaching your boys as they're growing up to be emotionally intelligent and in tuned, you are really doing them a disservice when it comes to finding a partner in this society.
Yes, very, very much. That's a good key takeaway too, for those that have kids or might want to have kids.
Yeah, like it is a necessity to find quality partnership and to have a longer lifespan. I want to circle back around to the male loneliness crisis, right? So men are less likely to maintain emotional support networks if they're not like married, like women are their primary tie to emotional support networks.
Yeah, totally.
Women are often the anchor to those family connections and community networks.
Yeah, I that is true. That's true for our dynamic.
Yeah, and as marriage rates decline, many men lose their primary emotional support structures. And that contributes to loneliness, isolation, mental health struggles, etc. Many were socialized to outsource emotional intimacy almost entirely to a partner.
Yeah.
And now I wonder if that emotional support is needed more from friends, and not many people have those skill sets. So men in 1990, about 55% of them said they had 6+ close friends. Now that's down to 27% in 2021.
Whoa.
Men with no close friends, now that's 15% of the population versus it was 3% in 1990. There is a legitimate argument that like men have less relationships. They do have less relationships. And to top it off, now they have less like intimate relationships too, you know?
Yeah.
And there's common like, kind of like what you're saying about the boomers saying that the millennials ruined this, right?
Ruin everything.
There's this common explanation that dating apps ruined everything. But really, dating apps really revealed this existing dynamic. Apps did not create unequal labor expectations, emotional immaturity, dependency shifts, or gender role conflicts. They just exposed them.
You know, just as a side comment, it's interesting because there's plenty of studies done when you have too many choices. It creates analysis paralysis. Mm-hmm. And it's harder to make a choice.
Yes.
Right? So many things like, give me 15 choices for what to eat for dinner versus like 2 or 3. It's harder to make a choice. Dating app, you have a giant pool of people. And there's so many choices.
Yeah. So if we were to do a comparison, old model versus new model, emerging model rewards, the old model, economic provision, right? The new model, emotional availability. Can you discuss difficult emotions?
And these are rewards that women get from being in a marriage or relationship?
Yeah, yes, reward models. Yes.
Okay.
So women would have economic provision. Now women are looking for emotional availability. Can you discuss difficult emotions?
Yeah.
Women were looking for stability. Now they're looking for shared labor. Do you contribute equally? Women were looking maybe for social status. Now they're looking for respect. Do you genuinely value your partner's autonomy? Friendship. Would someone enjoy your company even without romance? And accountability. Can you admit mistakes and change behavior? These are becoming the relationship differentiators. And this is where if men have these abilities, they will rise to the top.
So you're basically giving away the cheat codes for any guys listening who are single. Hey, these are the things you should be focused on developing to be attractive to a woman. Right?
Yeah.
But instead, why would guys be like, "Oh, that's not right. I shouldn't have to develop. They are wanting the wrong things, or they're just being feminists, or blah blah blah." When it's really like, dude, if you just listen, I mean, they're kind of giving you the keys to the kingdom here.
Yeah, and,
Right?
and I think a lot of women are giving the keys to the kingdom often. When people talk about this stuff, And I want to say again, this whole episode is heavily based on Davis's article, which I am going to link in the resources and in the show notes. So I don't want you to think that this is all like original content. This is content that was extrapolated and now we're just discussing it. There was, just to move on to, there was the older dependency-based systems where leaving was difficult. Now both people can leave. Staying was often mandatory. Now both people must continue choosing each other all the time. That requires trust, vulnerability, and emotional maturity. Because it used to be that you're married, you're stuck. But now we have no-fault divorce. And so it's so important that no-fault divorce goes away.
Yeah.
Because women will be trapped.
Right.
Here are some good discussion questions. Are modern dating struggles mostly technological or cultural? I think we kind of answered that.
Yeah, I definitely think we answered that.
But I think this is good to, like, if you have kids or whatever that are older, to maybe discuss.
Yeah.
Have relationship expectations become healthier or more unrealistic? Like, is it healthier to want these things?
Right.
Or is it more unrealistic?
Yeah.
What skills make someone a desirable partner today?
Well, then we got that.
Are men and women adapting to social changes at the same pace?
That is an interesting question.
I would say
no.
Not at the same pace, probably.
No, not. I would think women are adapting more quickly because otherwise we wouldn't see this dating quote-unquote crisis if men were adapting just as quickly.
Mm-hmm.
To the market shift.
Yeah, to the market shift, yeah. Is the loneliness epidemic primarily a relationship problem or a friendship problem? What would a truly equal partnership look like in practice? So I think those are all great questions, especially if you have like older kids to like discuss.
Yeah, or even just food for thought with your if you're single, with your other single friends, or talking with your spouse about it. interesting food for thought. What was the last discussion question you had said?
What would a truly equal partnership look like in practice?
That's interesting. That's so much subjective imagination. Like just kind of like what you would imagine from your own experiences and opinion. That's interesting because that's going to sound different to everybody. And I think that's a good question to ask when you're dating. Do you both have the same idea of what an equal partnership looks like?
Yeah.
Because you could have widely different answers of what that actually looks like in practice, you know?
I think there's a lot of men out there who aren't, how do I want to say this? Who are very like pro-equal relationships, right? I'll be 50-50, right? But I don't think those men always know how to carry the emotional burden and the cognitive load.
They're 50% of that.
They're 50% of that. I don't think that is quite understood or quite taught. And I think that probably needs to be taught in the home growing up.
Yeah, I think a lot of men, myself included, are or have been just unaware. Don't even understand mental load or the emotional load.
It was most likely never modeled because mom did it.
Exactly. So to you, that's just, you don't even see that there's...
It's a blind spot. It doesn't
exist.
exist.
There you go. It's a blind spot.
Yeah, it doesn't exist. It's a blind spot. And I don't think it's intentional necessarily. All the time.
I don't think so either. I think, like I said earlier, it's like you're a fish who's in water. You don't even realize. You don't realize it because it's just the fabric of your reality and always has been.
Yeah. And I do have a deep compassion. I do, like a very big soft spot for men because like they didn't choose to grow up in this culture. They didn't choose to be raised this way. And now it's shifting and that is, I feel like there's like generation here is going to be lost relationally if there's not a big shift and change.
Yeah. It reminds me of like the rapid technological shifting. Like I think of my dad.
Yeah.
Like towards the end of before he retired, you know, people would send him emails. He'd pick up the phone and call you back. You know?
Yeah.
And you feel lost because the old world that you knew in terms of technology is gone. And there's so much that changed so quickly. There's so much more technology now. And you just feel like I don't have a place in this world. I don't understand this world. And I think relationally with somewhat rapid relational shifts. I mean, you talked 1990 to 2022, was it? Mm-hmm. So 22 years. Think about how much change there relationally and culturally in terms of like men and women. Then, yeah, you probably have some feelings of like, I don't know, I don't recognize this world. I don't know where my place is here because you have not been able to adapt quick enough. And usually you're not unless you're young and your brain has more neuroplasticity to it. And you're less set in beliefs and practices. Mm-hmm. That's hard to feel like you're in a world that you used to fit in, but you don't anymore, and you don't know how to fit now.
Yeah.
And it also feels like attack on your personhood. Because now who you are you view it as who you are is a problem now in relationships, when it wasn't before. At least it wasn't verbalized before. But really it's a skill set deficit, not something wrong with you as a person.
Yeah. All that to say, very interesting article. I think she made a ton of great points, and it's a good read, so I would go read it. I am going to include the link as well as some supporting documentation in my cited sources for you guys so that you guys can see. But great point that the landscape is changing. Men need to have the skill set to participate in the relationship landscape that is currently shifting. I mean, it's happening. And, you know, I mean, I think of my best friend. I think of your sister. And I think about the fact that she has said so many times, like, it's going to take a lot for me to get married because I have to be happier with them than I am now. She owns a home. She has a doctorate's degree. She's financially stable. She has a huge retirement fund.
She got a lot of friends.
She's got a lot of friends. Like, a man is really going to have to show up and offer a lot.
Yeah.
And I do want to say, I do think there's something that men do offer in heterosexual, I'm talking heterosexual relationships, by the way, when I'm referring to this, but that there is something that, like, women naturally desire from men that are heterosexual. Like, I think that there is a spot there, a longing there, a desire there, but that it is a risk. It's a huge risk because, statistically speaking, you have a high probability of being more unhappy as a woman married than you do as a single woman. And that is not the case with men. Men, statistically speaking, have a higher probability of being happier married than not married.
I think it's important that men who are single understand that. Like, so you understand where the women you are dating or vetting to date or whatever, that's where they're coming from. That this is a big risk for them. Not as big of a risk for you at all, but a huge risk for them.
Yeah.
So, understand if they are being...
have quote unquote high standards.
Yeah, that's a good way
or
to
are
put
being
it.
quote unquote picky.
Yeah, picky is a word I was trying to think of an alternative for. Yeah, I mean, like, understand why. Because there is a huge risk there that you don't know what that feels like necessarily. Well, then you might feel like, oh, well, Jay, sure I do. I know. I mean, I'm risking too because I could be unhappy. Dude, you totally could be unhappy. 100%, not downplaying that at all. But statistically, there's a higher probability of them being unhappy than you. Statistically.
Yeah.
And statistically means in reality.
Mm-hmm. There's all this talk about how, like, especially in Christian circles, about the divorce rate, and people get divorced all the time and all this stuff. The divorce rate is actually dropping, but also is the marriage rate. Less people are getting divorced and less people are getting married.
Yeah, so what would you want? More people getting married and more divorces, or less people getting married and less divorces?
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably better just to not get married than to get married and get divorced.
I mean,
right?
From an economic standpoint and probably from a mental health standpoint, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So be single longer, be quote unquote pickier, get married later if you do, and you might save yourself some serious heartache. But then it opens up a big can of worms because, man, we got a birth rate problem everywhere.
Yeah, we do have a birth rate problem. And Dr. Oz came out and said, I forget what the statistic was he quoted, but I was like, what was it? And he used the term underbabied. 1 second. I'm going to look it up real quick here.
And what I'm referring to technically is moving towards an inverted pyramid for population, where less young, more old, because the birth rate is continuing to decline. And then we have issues with care for the elderly, Social Security, Medicare in our country specifically, issues with labor. We're going to have a lot more we're going to have like no unemployment, but a ton of jobs that no one's going to be able to fill, and our economy will contract. It's a whole thing.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the deal. He came out and said 1 in 3 Americans are underbabied.
What does that mean?
Meaning they either don't have children or have fewer children than they would like, is what he said. He says the U.S. birth rate has fallen below replacement levels.
Oh, yeah. Totally.
So the fertility rate right now is around 1.5 children per woman.
Yeah.
Compared to the replacement rate of 2.1.
Right. So our population will shrink over time.
Yes, our population will shrink.
Without immigration, which could be the saving grace of our country, reverse.
Yeah. Right. So they were saying they made a website, which was moms.gov. And what I found interesting about this website, there was a lot of things, that I found interesting about this website. But one of the things that really stood out to me, above everything else, not one link or helpful resource to any kind of benefits when it comes to insurance benefits or when it comes to WIC or food benefits or anything like that, which it doesn't surprise me because it's Republican ran.
Yeah, sure.
But the truth is this. Medicaid finances approximately 41 to 42% of all births in the United States.
Whoa, that is not what I would think.
Yeah.
That's huge.
So when we're talking about Medicaid cuts, guess what that's going to affect?
Oh, yeah. Ton of births.
There's no help.
And there's all these cuts to Medicaid, right? But there's not going to be any funding going towards contraception, making that more widely available.
No, nothing
or
like that.
education. Yeah. So you're just going to have. So you might even have. You could even have like a ton of the same birth rate, just with less money to pay for these births.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just want to say that, there was no financial anything except for the Trump babies. You could do the $1,000. They invest $1,000 into the stock market. There's a fund.
That's stupid.
And then it like compounds over time.
Yeah, but you're gonna
and you can add to it or you can't add to it, But like that's not an immediate.
That's a drop in the bucket for what you actually need. That's why it's stupid.
Yes.
You know what? We're gonna pull funding for Medicaid, and we're not gonna do anything to fight massive inflation that affects everybody. But you know what? We'll put $1,000 in the stock market for you. What the heck are you talking about?
Well, right, and then who's controlling that money? Who's actually getting to play with that money until your kid becomes of age?
Right. Who's managing the account?
Right. So really, it's the government giving the government money.
A little slush fund.
Yes, exactly. A little slush fund, a little bit there. So anyways, I just thought that was interesting. There was a lot of things interesting about that website, but that was one that stuck out to me considering that 41 to 42% of all births in the United States are financed by Medicaid, and we want more babies. And we don't want paid maternity leave or even mandatory maternity leave.
Well, we also don't want as much immigration, so less babies coming that way. So what the heck are you going to do?
We want rich, white people having babies. That's what we want.
But they are the ones who have the least.
Yes.
Statistically.
Yes.
We're going to have such an they're not doing anything to help with this inverted pyramid we're moving towards. I think we're more towards like a cylinder now versus a pyramid, but we're not inverted yet, but we're going to be.
Well, thanks for listening today. We always appreciate it. So sorry if there was any background noise that was disturbing. Again, we are camping with our family, but we are also dedicated to this podcast.
Yeah, we are here. We are wanting to bring the information to all the people, and I'm wanting to learn every episode like I usually do.
Jay was recognized the other day.
I was.
He was recognized for being that guy in the videos whose wife talks to him about women's issues.
Yeah. I was told I look like that guy a lot.
Yeah. What dawned on me is no one's probably ever going to recognize me.
True, because you're always behind
because
the
I'm
scenes.
never on, but you would have more of a chance of doing that. That rarely happens, but it is funny when it does happen because it seems like so weird. We're so like removed from it in a way, like we're just people that post videos. We're just normal people that post videos, and then so when someone's like, "Are you that person?" It's like, "What?"
This isn't an operation.
No. Yes. Exactly.
This isn't a.
We're in our camper bed right now.
Yeah. This isn't like a hardcore business.
Yeah.
Or something.
I make no money off this podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. Podcast. Zero.
This is just what we do.
Yeah.
So thank you for listening. I've had a couple of people reach out recently and was like, hey, we discussed this with our family, or we are really avid listeners. And that is truly what keeps me going. That is the currency in which keeps me going.
Yeah. When this person recognized me, they were talking about how much that him and his wife, and then eventually I met his wife too, but they love the content and they talk about it together and listen together. And that's why I like doing it.
Yeah,
I like doing it.
I like thinking that in a very microcosm way, we are making a difference as being just a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
I just want to make just a little bit of headway.
Yeah.
So
do our part.
Thank you for the people that reach out and say something because it really does keep us going.
Yeah. Yeah. I love hearing from you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, until next time.
Ta-ta. I hope for those of you listening, something was intriguing or sparked a curiosity, or you felt affirmed or challenged. Stay educated. Take the pink pill. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give us a follow and maybe a nice review.